The work yard roared with the unrelenting grind of machinery. Aaron's arms ached from swinging the pickaxe. The days here stretched into one another, a blur of sweat and alien overseers barking orders in a language he only half understood. The sulfuric air burned his lungs, and the dim, artificial light made the faces of the other prisoners seem like ghosts. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, hope drained away. Aaron shoved his pickaxe into the rocky ground again and again, wishing he could just stop. But he had learned the hard way that any slack brought swift punishment. His first day here, one of the guards, a towering figure with gleaming black exoskeletal armor, had lashed him across the back for hesitating. The pain still flared when he bent too far, and the long, jagged scar that ran from his shoulder blade down to his waist was a permanent reminder of the consequences. "Keep moving, human," the guard snapped. It pointed at Aaron with an angular claw. Aaron bit down the urge to talk back. He had enough scars. Instead, he adjusted his grip and kept swinging, pretending the dull ache in his muscles was just another annoyance to push through. As he worked, he couldn't help stealing glances at the figure standing near the central platform. Xana, one of the overseers. Unlike the armored guards, she wore a silver uniform, her pale blue skin almost luminous in the harsh light. Her facial features were sharp and symmetrical, her elongated eyes glowing faintly violet. She never barked orders, never carried a whip. Instead, she seemed to watch, to calculate. But there was something else. Once, when Aaron had stumbled under the weight of a load, she had signaled to another worker, an older human named Beck, to help him. It wasn't much, but it saved Aaron from a beating that day. Now, weeks later, he caught her glancing at him again. He could almost feel her gaze lingering, and he couldn't tell if it meant trouble or something else entirely. Beck, working beside Aaron, grunted as he dragged a chunk of ore into the collection bin. The man's hair was streaked with gray. His arms knotted with the kind of strength you only get from a lifetime of hard labor. "Watch that one," Beck muttered under his breath, his eyes flicking toward Xana. "She's different." Different how? Aaron kept his voice low, mindful of the nearby guards. "She doesn't look at you the way the others do. They see a tool. She sees, I don't know what she sees, but it's something." Aaron snorted softly. "Maybe she's just making sure I don't screw up again." "Could be," Beck said. "Could also be she's tired of this place too. Maybe she's looking for someone who can shake things up." Aaron didn't respond. He kept his head down and his pickaxe moving. After all, what could he do? His hands were bound by the same fate as every other human here. Shake things up? Sure. And end up beaten, thrown in the pits, or worse. Later, during a brief meal break, Aaron and Beck sat on a pile of discarded machinery, wolfing down their bland, protein-packed rations. The alien guards stood a few yards away, their glowing eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. Beck leaned closer. "We could try something, you know?" Aaron looked at him sharply. "Try what?" "Something to disrupt their operation. Get them to loosen their grip just a bit. Make them worry we're more trouble than we're worth." "And what happens when they figure out who's behind it?" Aaron shook his head. "They're not exactly the forgiving type." Beck grinned, his face lined with the wear of years spent in captivity. "That's why you pick your moments carefully. They're too confident. They think we're broken. We just need to remind them we're still here." Aaron studied him for a moment. Beck's voice carried the weight of someone who had been through worse and survived. Someone who had learned to keep going because giving up wasn't an option. Aaron knew that feeling all too well. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Beck shrugged. "Once or twice. Let's just say I've had practice making people in charge very uncomfortable." A crackling voice interrupted them. Xana stood a short distance away, her hands clasped behind her back. "Return to your workstations." The guards didn't speak, but their presence was clear, flanking Xana like shadows. Aaron felt a flicker of tension. There was something about the way she said it, not with the harsh bark of a commander, but with a measured calm that made her seem almost human. Beck nudged Aaron as they stood. "Keep your eyes open. Watch what she does. I've got a feeling about her." As they returned to the grind of mining, Aaron couldn't help but steal another glance at Xana. Her face was unreadable, her movements deliberate. Beck might have been right. She wasn't like the others. What that meant, though, was still a mystery. For now, Aaron knew only one thing. If Beck was planning to shake things up, he'd better be ready. The alien overseers weren't known for their mercy, and any mistake could cost them dearly. Chapter 2. Unlikely Allies. The following morning, Aaron found himself working in the old machine bay. The bay was quiet, apart from the occasional hiss of steam or the faint hum of dormant equipment. The guards rarely came in here, and the foreman seemed to pay it little attention. If the rest of the outpost was a hive of activity, the machine bay was a forgotten corner. Aaron was recalibrating an automated arm on one of the conveyor systems, the kind of work that required precision but not much oversight. Beck leaned against a console a few steps away, his weathered hands tracing the edges of the control panel. They hadn't spoken much since their brief conversation in the yard, but now that they were relatively alone, Beck broke the silence. "You've been looking at her, haven't you?" he said. Aaron paused, turning his head just enough to glance at Beck. "What are you talking about?" "That overseer. Xana." Beck's voice dropped. "I've seen you watching her." Aaron narrowed his eyes. "I watch all of them. Keeps me out of trouble." Beck chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're not fooling me. I've been here long enough to know when someone's caught someone else's eye. Even if I were looking, what would be the point?" Aaron adjusted the torque on the arms joint. "She's one of them. I'm one of us. Nothing's going to change that." "Maybe," Beck said, running his fingers over the console's controls as if searching for something. "But maybe not. She's different. You've noticed it, I've noticed it. She doesn't treat you like the others do." Aaron didn't reply. He had noticed it, but acknowledging it out loud felt dangerous. Instead, he finished the adjustment, straightened up, and moved to the next machine. Beck followed. "You ever think she might be on our side?" Beck asked. Aaron let out a short laugh. "On our side? She's a supervisor. She probably volunteered for the job. Or maybe she didn't," Beck countered. "Maybe she ended up here the same way we did." Aaron gave him a skeptical look. "You really believe that?" Beck shrugged. "I believe she's not like the rest. That's all I'm saying." The conversation was interrupted by the hiss of the door at the far end of the bay. Aaron stiffened. It was Xana, her silver uniform catching the pale overhead lights as she stepped inside. Her eyes scanned the room before landing on them. Aaron expected a reprimand, a reminder to keep working. Instead, she walked over to the console where Beck stood. "You are out of position," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We're still working," Beck replied. His tone was respectful but not submissive. "These machines need maintenance." Xana tilted her head slightly, considering his response. "You were assigned to the ore grinders, not the secondary conveyors." Beck nodded. "We finished there early. Figured it was better to keep working than stand around." Aaron kept his head down, pretending to be absorbed in his task. He felt Xana's gaze shift to him, lingering for a moment before she returned her attention to Beck. "This area is not under your supervision," she said, though her voice lacked the usual harshness of a reprimand. Beck glanced at Aaron, then back to her. "I take it you'd rather we not waste time." She regarded him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back toward the door. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shouting match would have been. "See," Beck said quietly after she left. "Different." Aaron sighed. "You're reading too much into it." "Am I? Or are you just afraid to admit she might be the one we need?" Aaron didn't answer. He returned his focus to the machine in front of him, trying to push the thoughts of Xana from his mind. But Beck's words lingered. He knew what Beck was trying to do, and the truth was, he wasn't sure if it was hope or foolishness. What he did know was that Xana's presence was impossible to ignore, and that made her more dangerous than any guard. Chapter 3. Secrets Revealed. Aaron's chance came 2 days later. He was back in the machine bay, tasked with dismantling a faulty hydraulic lift. Beck was assigned to the same area, working on a nearby conveyor belt. The clatter of metal parts and the hiss of leaking fluid masked their quiet conversation. "I don't like it," Aaron muttered, tossing a broken valve into the scrap bin. "You don't like anything," Beck replied, grinning as he tightened a bolt. "What's it this time?" "Her," Aaron said, jerking his chin toward the far end of the room. Xana stood by the main console, her back to them as she reviewed a schematic on the holographic display. "She's just standing there, Aaron," Beck said. "Not exactly cause for alarm." "It's not that," Aaron said, lowering his voice. "She's always there, always watching. And it's not just us. She's always keeping an eye on the other overseers, too. It's like she's waiting for something." Beck leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Maybe she's waiting for someone to make the first move." "Don't start that again," Aaron said sharply. "It's not a game, Beck. One wrong move and we're dead." "She hasn't turned us in yet," Beck pointed out. "Think about it. She caught us in here the other day, way out of our assigned area. Did she report us? No, she could have. Instead, she just told us to leave. And since then, she's been giving us more of the tricky repairs, the ones that let us work away from the main yards. Less oversight." Aaron shook his head. "You're grasping at straws. For all we know, she's just using us to keep the machines running, so she doesn't have to deal with the guards breathing down her neck. Or maybe she's giving us room to breathe," Beck countered. "A chance to figure something out." Before Aaron could respond, Xana turned and started walking toward them. They quickly returned their focus to their work, pretending not to notice her approach. When she reached their station, she spoke in her usual calm, measured tone. "You are making progress," she said. "This machine will be functional soon?" Aaron didn't look up. "Depends on whether the parts you gave us hold up." Xana tilted her head slightly, studying him. "They should. I chose them myself." Her words made Aaron pause. It wasn't a usual response from an overseer. He glanced at her, meeting her violet eyes for a brief moment. "You're taking an interest in our repairs now?" "It is my duty to ensure efficiency," Xana replied. "However, I have also observed that you and Beck work well together. You achieve results." Beck chuckled softly, shaking his head as he wiped grease from his hands. "Not sure if that's a compliment or just a reminder that we're cogs in the machine." Aaron shot Beck a warning look. Xana didn't react to the comment. Instead, she stepped closer to the console Beck had been working on and examined the display. After a moment, she turned back to Aaron. "You said the parts might not hold up. If they fail, what would you need to repair it?" Aaron hesitated, then rattled off a short list of components. Xana nodded, her expression unreadable. "I will see that these are made available." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving them in stunned silence. Beck was the first to speak. "See? She's helping us. She didn't have to do that." Aaron exhaled slowly. "Maybe she just wants her machines to run smoother. Or maybe she's testing us," Beck said, "seeing if we're worth her time." Aaron frowned, unsure what to think. Xana's actions didn't make sense. Overseers didn't usually care about the well-being of their workers, let alone take personal responsibility for providing parts. Yet there she was, quietly watching, occasionally stepping in, never punishing. Why would she risk it? Aaron said finally. "If the guards figure out she's bending the rules, she'll be in as much trouble as we are." "Maybe she doesn't care anymore," Beck said. "Maybe she's had enough of this place, just like us." Aaron mulled it over as he finished reassembling the lift. Xana's behavior was certainly strange, and Beck's theory, while far-fetched, was starting to make a sliver of sense. But trusting her was another matter. He couldn't afford to believe that anyone on this alien outpost was truly on his side. Still, as he tested the lift and heard it hiss to life, he couldn't shake the feeling that Xana's eyes were on him, as if she was waiting for him to understand something he wasn't yet seeing. Chapter 4. The Spark of Change. By now, Aaron had begun to see the cracks in the alien overseer system. The guards were efficient, brutal, and disciplined, but their reliance on tightly controlled routines made them predictable. And predictable meant vulnerable if you knew how to look for the right openings. It wasn't a revelation he reached alone. "Aaron, come here," Beck whispered one morning as they worked side by side, stacking crates of processed ore. His voice was low enough that only Aaron could hear. "I've been watching their patrols. There's a pattern." Aaron adjusted his grip on the heavy crate, pretending to be fully focused on the task. "Go on." Every fourth cycle, the north platform's guard rotation leaves a gap, about 3 minutes, sometimes less. It's tight, but if you time it right, you could slip through. Aaron frowned. "What's on the north platform?" Beck smirked faintly, not looking up from the crate he was loading. "Maintenance access to their internal data arrays. If someone were to get in there, they might learn things. Things the overseers don't want us to know." Aaron set his crate down and turned his head slightly to glance at Beck. "You mean sabotage? Information first." "Sabotage later," Beck said. "We need to know more about their supply chains, their power grid. Blind sabotage only draws attention without doing real damage." "Sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while," Aaron said, his tone cautious. He wasn't about to jump into anything reckless without a plan. "Longer than you've been here," Beck admitted. "But I needed the right person to help. I'm not as fast as I used to be, and to be honest, I don't trust most of the others. They're too scared. You, though, you've still got a fire in you." Aaron gave him a hard look. "And you're sure this isn't just going to get us killed?" "Nothing's certain," Beck replied with a shrug. "But if we don't do something, we'll rot here. It's a choice. Die a prisoner or risk dying free." Aaron didn't respond right away. His instincts told him Beck was right, but his survival instincts also told him to keep his head down. He needed more time, more information. If he was going to take a risk, it had to be worth it. Later that day, Aaron found himself face to face with Xana again. She had summoned him to the control bay, where a series of broken relays were causing a bottleneck in or processing. It was routine work, but Aaron noticed something unusual. Xana had dismissed the guards, leaving only her and a single maintenance drone in the room. Aaron worked silently for several minutes before Xana broke the silence. "You and Beck are becoming very efficient." He glanced at her, cautious. "Just doing our job. You are both more resourceful than the others," Xana said, her tone measured. "You find solutions quickly. It is noteworthy." Aaron didn't reply. He focused on the relay, tightening a connection. He couldn't tell if she was complimenting them or setting them up for closer scrutiny. Xana took a step closer, her presence calm rather than intimidating. "I understand that you do not trust me." "Why would I?" Aaron said before he could stop himself. He glanced at her, half expecting a reprimand. Instead, she regarded him with what he could only describe as curiosity. "Because trust is earned," Xana said, "and I have not yet earned yours. I accept that." Aaron turned back to his work, frowning. "If that's supposed to make me feel better, it doesn't." "It is not my intention to make you feel better," Xana said evenly. "It is my intention to understand." "Understand what?" Aaron asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "You," she said simply. "Your determination. Your unwillingness to give in. It is unusual." Aaron snorted. "You've never seen anyone try to stay alive before?" "I have," Xana replied. "But I have never seen anyone who, despite the odds, continues to think, to adapt. You and Beck have a way of seeing patterns others miss. That interests me." Aaron set his tools down and faced her fully. "If you're so interested in what we can do, why keep us here as slaves?" Xana didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I did not choose this system. I was born into it. But I have questions, doubts." Aaron crossed his arms, watching her closely. "And what do you want from me?" "I want you to keep thinking," Xana said. "To keep adapting. Perhaps, in time, there will be a way to change the system. But I cannot do it alone." Aaron stared at her, unsure what to say. Xana's words weren't a promise of freedom or an alliance. But they were something, an acknowledgement that the status quo wasn't set in stone. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she added. "But it begins somewhere." Aaron looked back at the relay, his mind racing. He didn't trust her fully, but he also couldn't ignore what she was saying. Maybe, just maybe, Beck was right about her. Chapter 5: Building Bridges. In the days following their encounter in the control bay, Aaron found it increasingly difficult to ignore Xana's presence. She didn't seem like the other overseers, where they barked orders and punished dissent. She watched and listened, rarely speaking unless necessary. It left Aaron unsettled. The guards he could predict, Xana he could not. Aaron and Beck found themselves working together again in a storage hangar, repairing a freight drone that had been inactive for months. The alien machine loomed over them, its metallic plating scuffed and its circuits clogged with dust. Beck was perched on a ladder, adjusting the drone's sensor array, while Aaron tinkered with its main propulsion core. "I still don't trust her," Aaron said, tightening a corroded valve. "She talks like she's on our side, but words don't mean much. Sometimes words are all you get," Beck replied, his voice calm as he worked. "You think I don't know that? I've been here longer than you. I've heard all kinds of overseers, seen how they treat people. She's not like them." "She's still one of them," Aaron muttered. "That doesn't just go away because she says a few nice things." "True." Ching beside him. "She's looking for an ally." Aaron shot him a skeptical look. "An ally for what?" Beck shrugged. "Who knows? But she's not stupid. She's seen what we can do, what you can do. Maybe she wants a way out of this just as much as we do." Aaron paused, wiping the grime from his hands. "You really believe that?" "I believe we're not going to survive this place if we don't start building some bridges," Beck said. "You want to fight every overseer, every guard, every rule? Good luck. Me? I'd rather find a crack in the wall and work on making it bigger." Before Aaron could respond, the hangar doors hissed open. Both men turned, tensing as Xana entered, her expression unreadable. She carried a small device in her hand, a tablet of sorts, its surface glowing faintly with alien glyphs. She stopped a few paces away from them. "Is the drone functional?" she asked. "Almost," Beck replied smoothly, stepping forward. "Just a few more adjustments." Xana nodded and looked at Aaron. "And the propulsion core?" "Should be ready in a few minutes," Aaron said, his tone neutral. She took a step closer, her gaze flicking between the drone and the men. "You are both very efficient." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It is an observation," Xana said. "Your efficiency benefits both of us." "How do you figure that?" Aaron asked, folding his arms. "The less time you spend on repairs, the less time I must spend explaining delays to my superiors," Xana said simply. "It is a mutually beneficial arrangement." Beck smirked. "That's one way of looking at it." Xana studied Aaron for a moment, then held out the device she was carrying. "This is a diagnostic scanner. It may assist you in completing the repairs more quickly." Aaron hesitated, eyeing the device suspiciously. "Why are you giving us this?" "Because I have no interest in prolonging your tasks," Xana said. "And because you have earned a measure of trust." Aaron exchanged a glance with Beck, who shrugged. With no other option, Aaron took the scanner and turned it over in his hands. It was lighter than it looked, its interface unfamiliar but intuitive. He activated it, watching as it displayed a detailed schematic of the drone's propulsion system. "It's useful," Aaron admitted grudgingly. "Good," Xana said. "Use it to finish the repairs. I will return shortly." She turned and left the hangar, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Aaron stared after her, his grip tightening on the scanner. "What is she playing at?" "She's not playing," Beck said, leaning against the drone. "She's testing us. And so far, we're passing." "Passing what?" Aaron said. "A loyalty test? An obedience test? Does it matter?" Beck asked. "As long as we keep showing her what we can do, she'll keep giving us tools. Tools we can use to stay alive. Maybe even get out." Aaron exhaled slowly. He didn't like it, didn't trust it, but he couldn't deny the advantage Xana had just handed them. If the scanner could help them learn more about the drones, about the outpost systems, then maybe, just maybe, they could start to gain the upper hand. We'll see, Aaron said, turning back to the propulsion core. But I'm not letting my guard down. Wouldn't expect you to, Beck said, picking up his tools. But sometimes, you have to take what you're given and make it work. Aaron didn't answer. He focused on the task in front of him, using the scanner to identify a damaged relay. As he worked, he couldn't help wondering what Xana's next move would be, and what it would mean for all of them. Chapter 6. Tides Turning. Aaron and Beck stood side by side in the storage bay, surrounded by stacks of glowing metal crates. They were supposed to be loading them onto an automated transport drone, but Aaron had been stalling. He kept checking the readouts on a small, handheld device Xana had quietly slipped to him a few days earlier. The scanner had proven to be more than just a diagnostic tool. It also picked up faint signals from the outpost's communication network. Aaron had been studying these signals every chance he got. What do you think she's expecting us to find? Beck asked, leaning on the edge of a crate. He'd been watching Aaron work, his face thoughtful. Not sure yet, Aaron admitted, keeping his voice low. But these comm logs aren't just maintenance reports. There's data here on supply schedules, security protocols, and even some encrypted directives from the central command. If we can crack those, we might learn something useful. Useful for what? Beck asked. You planning on taking over the whole outpost? Aaron shook his head. No, but information is power. If we know how they operate, when they expect shipments, where their weak points are, we can start making moves that actually matter. Not just survival. Maybe even escape. Beck considered this, nodding slowly. Makes sense. But I still don't understand why she's helping us. If Xana wanted to keep us in line, why not just report us? Why give us something this valuable? Aaron glanced at the scanner, frowning. I've been asking myself the same question. Maybe she thinks we're too small to be a threat. Or maybe... He trailed off, not wanting to voice his suspicion out loud. Maybe what? Beck pressed. Aaron looked at him, then back down at the screen. Maybe she's not as loyal to the system as she pretends to be. Maybe she wants something from us. Something she can't get on her own. Like what? Beck leaned closer, lowering his voice. Revenge? Power? Freedom? I don't know, Aaron said. But I think we should find out. That night, after the other workers had been corralled back into their barracks, Aaron sat alone in a corner of the cramped sleeping quarters. The scanner's faint glow was his only light. He navigated the unfamiliar glyphs, piecing together fragments of messages. Most of them were mundane, supply requests, equipment orders, but one stood out. It was heavily encrypted, a directive marked urgent from the Overseer's central command. He had no way to crack it, not yet. But the fact that it existed meant something. It meant there was more going on here than simple mining operations. The door hissed open, and Beck slipped inside, careful not to wake the others. He sat down next to Aaron, glancing at the scanner. Anything new? Beck asked in a whisper. Aaron nodded, showing him the screen. This one's different. High-level encryption. Whatever it is, it's important. Beck whistled softly. Think Xana knows about it? She has to, Aaron said. She's the overseer here. Either she's following orders, or she's keeping this from her superiors. And if it's the second one? Beck asked. Aaron hesitated. Then she's playing a dangerous game. Beck leaned back against the wall, rubbing his chin. If that's true, she's more of an ally than we thought. But we need to be careful. If the guards catch on, it's not just us who'll pay the price. Aaron nodded. That's why we keep this between us. No one else can know. Agreed, Beck said. But if Xana's on our side, really on our side, we might have a shot at turning the tide. Aaron didn't respond right away. He knew Beck was right, but trust didn't come easy. Not here. Not in a place where every word and every move could mean the difference between life and death. He would need to keep watching Xana, studying her actions, and waiting for the moment when he could be certain. Let's get some sleep, Aaron said finally, turning off the scanner. We'll figure out the next step tomorrow. Beck nodded, rising to his feet. Don't take too long. We'll need our strength if we're going to make this work. Aaron stayed where he was for a moment, staring into the darkness. The scanner's afterimage lingered in his mind, a faint glimmer of something he couldn't quite define. Maybe Beck was right. Maybe there was a way to change the balance of power. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to fight back. But if they were going to do it, they would need more than information. They would need allies. And the one ally who mattered most was still a mystery. Chapter 7. A Dangerous Gambit. The days passed and the pressure grew. Aaron and Beck spent every spare moment deciphering the encrypted message, their movements careful and their conversations kept to a whisper. The guards had started to notice something was off. Their patrols through the machine bay became more frequent, and the overseers, except for Xana, seemed more on edge. It was only a matter of time before someone put the pieces together. Aaron was bent over a console in a side room, Beck standing just behind him. The message still wouldn't give up its secrets. He could feel Beck's impatience, hear it in the soft tap of his fingers against the wall. "I don't like this, Aaron," Beck said quietly. "We're drawing too much attention." Aaron didn't look up. "We can't stop now. This might be the key to everything. Or it might just be a dead end," Beck countered. "You're the one who said we can't let our guard down. If they catch us." "I know what happens if they catch us," Aaron snapped, then lowered his voice. "But if we don't take this chance, we're stuck here. Forever." Beck sighed. "Fine. But we need a plan, something solid. You think Xana's going to help us if it all goes south?" "I think Xana's as desperate as we are," Aaron said, finally straightening. "And I think she knows we're her best chance at changing things." "Doesn't mean we can trust her," Beck said. "No," Aaron agreed. "But we can't do this alone." Later that night, as the workers were herded back into the barracks, Aaron caught Xana's gaze from across the yard. It was a brief glance, one that only he seemed to notice. She lingered by the main platform longer than usual before turning and disappearing into the overseer's quarters. "She's waiting," Beck whispered as they were ushered inside. "You're going to talk to her, aren't you?" Aaron nodded. "I need to know what side she's really on." "You think she'll give you a straight answer?" Beck's voice was skeptical, but he didn't try to stop Aaron. "Just don't take too long. If this blows up in our faces, we need to be ready." Aaron waited until the guards' rounds slowed. When he slipped out of the barracks, the air was cold and the yard eerily silent. He made his way toward the overseer's quarters, every step feeling like a risk. Xana was waiting, standing near a side entrance. "You came," she said quietly, her violet eyes glinting in the dim light. "You're the one who told me to keep thinking," Aaron said. "So I did." Xana studied him, her expression calm but guarded. "And what did you conclude?" "That you're not just watching out for us," Aaron said. "You're looking for a way out." Her silence was telling. She glanced around the yard, then gestured for him to follow. They moved to a secluded corner, out of sight of any wandering guards. "Why are you doing this?" Aaron asked. "Why help us? What's in it for you?" Xana hesitated before answering. "I was assigned here because I questioned my orders one too many times. This outpost is not a reward. It is a punishment." Aaron frowned. "You don't strike me as the type to just give up." "I haven't," Xana said. "But I cannot do this alone. If I were to act against my superiors directly, I would be eliminated. And if I did nothing, I would remain here until I became like them." "And you think we're your way out?" Aaron asked, his tone edged with doubt. "I think you are different," Xana said. "You and Beck. You do not simply endure, you plan. You adapt. That is something my superiors do not understand." Aaron crossed his arms. "And what happens if we get caught?" "We will all face the same punishment," Xana said plainly. "I have no illusions about the risk. But I also have no illusions about the alternative." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unvarnished. Aaron didn't know whether to trust her completely, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't making a grand gesture or a promise she couldn't keep. She was being honest. And that honesty made his next decision both easier and harder. "All right," Aaron said finally. "We're in." But this has to be airtight. No mistakes. Xana nodded. Then we begin tomorrow. I will provide you with the access codes to the encrypted messages. With that information, we can find the vulnerabilities we need. And if we fail? Eren asked. Xana's expression didn't waver. Then we fail. But I would rather risk failure than accept this life. Eren stared at her for a long moment before nodding. He turned and walked back toward the barracks, his mind racing. Beck would have a lot to say about this plan, and Eren couldn't blame him. Trusting Xana was a gamble. But at least now it was a gamble with a chance, however small, of finally changing their fate. Chapter 8. The Price of Freedom. The outpost was more silent than usual, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Eren, Beck, and Xana stood in the dimly lit maintenance corridor, hidden from the guards' usual patrols. The plan was simple, but the risks were enormous. We've only got one shot at this, Eren whispered. His eyes locked on the small device in his hand. It was a transmitter modified from the scanner Xana had given them weeks ago. With it, they could send a signal to an automated supply ship passing near the outpost's orbit. If they could establish a connection, it would trigger a chain of events that might lead to their escape or their deaths. Let's go over it one more time, Beck said, his voice steady but low. He was gripping a makeshift tool that could double as a weapon just in case. Eren nodded, holding up the transmitter. I'll patch into the comm array and send the signal. It should take 30 seconds. Xana, you'll be at the main terminal to overwrite the alarms. Beck, you'll keep an eye on the corridor. If any guards show up, signal me and stall them. And if they don't buy my stalling? Beck asked. Then we improvise, Eren replied. But the goal is to stay quiet. If the guards catch on before the signal gets through, we're finished. Xana stepped closer, her gaze focused. You need to move quickly. Once the signal is sent, the supply ship will think it's responding to a maintenance request. We'll have a narrow window to reach the docking bay and board it before anyone realizes what's happening. Eren glanced at her. And you're sure the docking bay will be clear? As sure as I can be, Xana said. I've timed the patrols and secured the access codes. But nothing is guaranteed. Great, Beck muttered. Love a plan with a side of uncertainty. Eren gave him a sharp look. You're the one who said we needed to take a chance. Yeah, Beck grumbled. I'm just saying, let's not get cocky. Never planned on it, Eren said. He turned to Xana. Let's do this. They moved swiftly and silently, each taking their assigned position. Eren slipped into the comm array room, a narrow chamber filled with blinking panels and humming consoles. He crouched by a terminal, plugging the transmitter into an open port. The display lit up, showing a cascade of alien symbols. Eren's fingers flew over the controls, guided by the instructions Xana had provided. Status. Beck's voice came over the comm link they'd rigged. Almost there, Eren replied, his focus never wavering. Just keep watch. The transmitter began to blink steadily as it established a connection. Eren exhaled quietly. So far, so good. Meanwhile, Xana stood at the main terminal, her posture composed despite the tension in her jaw. She entered the override codes with deliberate precision. The display in front of her flashed green, indicating that the alarms were temporarily disabled. She could feel the weight of her decision bearing down on her. If anyone discovered her actions, there would be no mercy. But she had already crossed that line. This was the moment to see it through. Overriding alarms, Xana said into the comm link. You're clear. Back in the corridor, Beck shifted uneasily. The sound of approaching footsteps made his heart race. He glanced down the dimly lit passage and saw the faint glow of a guard's armor. They were closer than he'd anticipated. Trouble, Beck murmured. Guards on the way. Eren's voice came through the comm link. Stall him. Yeah, no problem, Beck muttered sarcastically. He stepped out into the corridor, forcing his posture into something casual. The guard's glowing eyes focused on him immediately. What are you doing here? The guard demanded in its guttural, alien tongue. Just fixing a junction, Beck said, gesturing to the maintenance tools in his hands. Got orders from the overseer. The guard didn't move, its gaze sharp. The overseer did not authorize maintenance here. Well, she did, Beck said firmly. And unless you want to explain to her why you slowed things down, I'd suggest you let me finish. For a moment, the guard hesitated. Beck held his ground, maintaining the confidence he didn't feel. Finally, the guard stepped back slightly, though its posture remained suspicious. Be quick, the guard said. You got it, Beck said, trying not to let his relief show. He turned back toward the maintenance room, giving the signal to Aaron. In the comm array room, Aaron saw the final confirmation flash on his display. The signal was sent. We're good, Aaron whispered into the comm link. Let's move. The group converged on the docking bay. The automated supply ship had already begun its approach. Xana's access codes granted them entry to the sealed chamber. The ship's hatch opened with a soft hiss, and they hurried inside, closing it behind them. Aaron quickly secured the controls, ensuring that their presence wouldn't trigger any alarms once the ship departed. As the ship lifted off, the outpost shrank beneath them. Aaron leaned back against the wall, the weight of the past months finally beginning to lift. Beck sat beside him, looking exhausted but alive. Xana stood near the front, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't captives. They were free. Aaron looked at Xana, a question in his eyes. What now? She turned to him, her expression steady. Now we find out what's next.